The courtroom was silent as the judge smirked, her eyes narrowing on the black lawyer standing before her. The tension in the room was palpable. The lawyer, Lisa Daniels, had worked tirelessly on her client's case, but today the judge's mocking tone made it clear she was not going to give her any breaks. "You honestly believe you can win this case?" Judge Martha Hayes sneered, her voice cutting through the air. "What are you even doing here? This isn't your usual courtroom, Ms. Daniels." Lisa's heart raced, but she refused to let the words get to her. She was used to being underestimated, especially as one of the few black female lawyers in the city. But this time it was different. This case was personal, and she had worked too hard to let anyone intimidate her. The room shifted uneasily as Lisa straightened her back and met the judge's gaze. "I am here because I believe in justice," Lisa replied, her voice steady despite the undercurrent of anger she felt. Judge Hayes chuckled, clearly enjoying the power she held in the moment. "Well, your belief in justice isn't going to help you here. Not today." But just as she was about to deliver another biting remark, something unexpected happened. Lisa took a deep breath, gathering her composure, and she made a move that no one in the room saw coming. "I think it's time you know exactly who you're dealing with, Your Honor," Lisa said, her voice cool and confident. Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but she said nothing. Lisa slowly removed a piece of paper from her briefcase and placed it on the table, her hand trembling ever so slightly. She could feel every eye in the room on her now. Lisa's eyes met Judge Hayes's once again. "I'm not just any lawyer in this courtroom," she said. "I'm the one who is going to take this case all the way to the Supreme Court." The judge's smirk faltered for the first time, her jaw tightening. Lisa stood firm, watching as the moment hung in the air. There was a collective gasp from the courtroom. Lisa paused, feeling the weight of the room's silence. Then, with a final breath, she added, "And by the way, I'm not the one you should be mocking." Suddenly, the courtroom door opened, and the court officers stepped aside as a figure entered, one that caused the entire room to go still. A tall woman, dressed in an elegant black robe, walked into the courtroom. "Your Honor," the woman said, addressing Judge Hayes directly. The voice was commanding yet calm. The judge's eyes widened in shock as she immediately stood up, but her mouth remained agape, unable to form a word. Lisa could barely hold back the smile creeping on her face. The woman turned to Lisa and gave a nod. "I believe you were about to reveal something important. Please continue." The words that followed sent a shockwave through the courtroom. Lisa's voice rang out, loud and clear, as she finally revealed the truth. "This courtroom, Your Honor," she said, her voice unwavering, "is presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court." The room fell into stunned silence. Everyone stared at the woman, recognizing her now. She was the very person they had all been looking past. The woman who had walked into the courtroom as if she owned it. Judge Hayes's face drained of color as she turned pale. The Chief Justice had been standing in front of her all along, and Lisa's revelation had caught her completely off guard. As the Chief Justice slowly walked towards the judge's bench, the tension in the air grew thicker. Lisa remained calm, but a rush of adrenaline surged through her. This was just the beginning. She had been underestimated, mocked, and humiliated, but now it was time for the truth to come out. "Judge Hayes," the Chief Justice began, her voice firm, "I believe you've made a serious error in judgment today." Lisa watched as Judge Hayes's face twisted in confusion, and she knew the battle was far from over. But today the tables had turned. As the Chief Justice took her seat and the court officers moved into position, the moment felt almost surreal. The audience, the lawyers, the witnesses, everyone in the courtroom was still processing the shock of the revelation. The judge's power had been shattered in an instant, but Lisa knew the true fight was just about to begin. "Lisa Daniels," the Chief Justice continued, her gaze fixed firmly on the stunned judge, "you've shown great strength today. But be warned, this isn't over." With that, the courtroom erupted into whispers, but Lisa's focus remained clear. She had just set into motion a chain of events that no one could predict. The Chief Justice, Justice Evelyn King, sat at the bench, her demeanor calm yet commanding. The courtroom had never been this quiet. Every eye was on her, and it seemed like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. Judge Hayes, still pale and shaken, glanced nervously at Lisa. She had lost all her confidence in an instant, and it was evident. For a moment, the power she once held over the courtroom seemed to vanish, replaced by a sense of deep regret. Lisa couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. This was justice, but it was only the beginning. I'm sorry, Your Honor," Judge Hayes stammered, looking directly at the Chief Justice. "I didn't know." "Obviously," Justice King interrupted, her voice sharp but not unkind. But that doesn't excuse your actions. You've made a mockery of this courtroom, of this process, and of the very principles of justice you were sworn to uphold. Lisa's heart raced as she stood, feeling the weight of this moment. The power in the room was shifting and she was at the center of it all. She glanced at the Chief Justice, who was now slowly turning her attention back to the courtroom, her eyes scanning the room with an almost unsettling intensity. "You have no idea what you've just done, Judge Hayes," Justice King continued, her voice carrying authority that seemed to fill every corner of the courtroom. "But you're about to find out." There was a brief pause. The tension was unbearable. Lisa could feel her palms begin to sweat as she waited, barely able to contain her anticipation. She had no idea what would happen next, but something told her this wasn't going to be a simple reprimand. The Chief Justice had a plan and she was about to execute it. "I'm going to suspend this case," Justice King announced, her words echoing through the room. "This trial is no longer under your jurisdiction, Judge Hayes." The room gasped in unison. The judge, once in full control, was now being stripped of her authority, her credibility shattered beyond repair. "I will be assuming full responsibility for this case from here on out," Justice King continued. "The trial will continue, but not under the leadership of someone who so blatantly disregards fairness and justice." Lisa's heart leapt. This was the moment she had been hoping for. The Chief Justice wasn't just reprimanding Judge Hayes, she was taking control of the entire trial. And it wasn't just about Lisa's case anymore. It was about something much bigger. "I'm sure you have questions, Judge Hayes," Justice King said, her gaze narrowing. "But you've lost the right to question anything in this courtroom. You will be removed from this case effective immediately. You will also face an internal review for your behavior." As the Chief Justice's words hung in the air, Lisa stood tall, her head held high. This was what she had wanted: justice. Not just for her client but for every person who had ever been wronged by an unjust system. The fight was far from over, but this was a significant victory. Judge Hayes, now defeated, slumped back in her seat, her face flushed with humiliation. She could do nothing but watch as her once powerful position crumbled before her eyes. "Ms. Daniels," Justice King said, turning her gaze to Lisa, "I'm sorry you had to endure this. I promise you we will make things right." Lisa nodded, her throat tight. She had fought for this moment, but the reality of it was overwhelming. This wasn't just about winning a case anymore, it was about exposing a deeper truth, one that went beyond the courtroom. The Chief Justice motioned for the court officers to step forward, and Judge Hayes was escorted from the room, her head bowed in shame. The courtroom remained eerily quiet, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. But as Lisa took her seat, a nagging feeling began to creep up inside her. She had just witnessed a massive shift in power, but she knew the real battle was only beginning. Judge Hayes's removal was just the start. The system was still flawed and Lisa had made enemies today, powerful ones. Justice King addressed the room again, her voice firm and unwavering. "We will continue with the trial, but not until we've fully addressed the issues at hand. This courtroom will be a place where all people are treated fairly, regardless of race, gender, or status." The words hung in the air like a promise, but Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more at play. The stakes were higher now and she couldn't afford to let her guard down. As the Chief Justice left the bench and the courtroom began to clear, Lisa made her way to the exit, her mind racing. What would happen now? How far would this go? She had exposed the flaws in the system, but what would be the cost? Her phone buzzed in her pocket and she pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A text message from her colleague Aaron popped up. "Did you see that? You did it, Lisa. You've got them on the ropes. But be careful, there's always a bigger game being played behind the scenes." Lisa stared at the message for a moment, feeling a chill run down her spine. Aaron's words were more than just a warning, they were a reminder of the dangerous road ahead. She had made a powerful enemy today. And Lisa knew deep down that the next steps would not come without consequence. With a final glance back at the now empty courtroom, Lisa stepped into the hallway, her mind focused on what was to come. The fight for justice had only just begun, and she was ready to see it through. The courthouse doors slammed shut behind Lisa as she stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight. The weight of the moment hung heavy on her shoulders, but the adrenaline was still coursing through her veins. She had just stood up to one of the most powerful figures in the legal system, and for a brief moment she felt invincible. But that invincibility quickly faded as reality set in. What had just happened in that courtroom wasn't just about winning a case. It was about something far deeper, something much more dangerous. As she walked briskly across the courthouse steps, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Aaron, her colleague who had been her ally in the fight against Judge Hayes. Lisa hesitated for a moment before answering. She knew this call wouldn't be easy. "Lisa," Aaron's voice crackled on the other end, "I just spoke to some of the others in the office. Word's already spreading. Judge Hayes is furious. And you can bet she won't let this go. There's more to this than just a simple court case." Lisa's heart sank. She had known this would come with consequences, but she hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly. "I know," Lisa replied, her voice steady, though the anxiety was beginning to creep in. "But I did what I had to do." She needed to be stopped. Aaron was silent for a moment, and Lisa could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind. "I get that, but be careful. This is bigger than you think. You've just opened a door, and I'm not sure what's waiting on the other side." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had known the risks, but the reality of it all was beginning to hit her. "I've already opened it," she said, her voice firm. "Now I have to walk through." Aaron sighed, clearly worried. "Just watch your back, okay? I'll keep my ears to the ground, but this isn't over." The line went dead and Lisa stared at her phone for a moment, deep in thought. She wasn't wrong to stand up for what was right. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this case was never just about the courtroom. It was about power, corruption, and a system that was designed to protect those at the top. As she walked to her car, her mind replayed the events of the day. The image of Judge Hayes' stunned face flashed before her eyes. But even more disturbing was the memory of the Chief Justice's calm demeanor. It was clear that Justice King had a plan, but Lisa couldn't help but wonder what it really meant. Was the Chief Justice really on her side, or was this all part of a larger game she didn't understand? Lisa got into her car and started the engine, pulling out of the parking lot. She needed to focus. She couldn't afford to let herself be distracted by uncertainty. The case was still ongoing, and now that Judge Hayes was out of the picture, it was time for her to prove that she could finish what she started. But as she made her way down the busy street, a sudden thought struck her. What if she was being watched? What if there were eyes on her, waiting for her to make a mistake? The feeling was unsettling and Lisa couldn't shake it. She glanced nervously in her rearview mirror, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the feeling lingered, gnawing at her. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a message from an unknown number. She opened it cautiously. "I know what you did today. You'll regret it. This isn't over." Lisa's heart skipped a beat. Who was he? And how did they know what had happened in the courtroom? It wasn't like she had announced the Chief Justice's involvement to the public. Only a few people in the courtroom had known. She quickly typed a reply, "Who is this?" The phone buzzed again almost immediately, but this time the message was even more cryptic. "You'll find out soon enough. But just know you've made an enemy of the wrong people. You're not as untouchable as you think." Lisa's fingers froze over the keyboard. Her mind raced. Could this be someone connected to Judge Hayes? Or was it someone even higher up in the system, someone with power far beyond her reach? For the first time that day, doubt began to creep in. She had fought so hard to expose the truth, to stand up for what was right, but now she was beginning to realize just how deep the corruption ran. She had just opened a door, but what lay behind it might be more than she could handle. As Lisa continued to drive, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled deeper into a web of lies and deceit. The text had shaken her, but it also fueled her determination. She had come this far and there was no turning back now. The only problem was she didn't know who she was up against. By the time Lisa reached her apartment, the weight of the day's events was beginning to take its toll. She sat in her car for a moment, staring at the building in front of her. The adrenaline from earlier had worn off, leaving her feeling exhausted and vulnerable. Before she got out, her phone buzzed once more, this time with a voicemail. She hit play without hesitation, wondering if it was from Aaron or someone else who could shed some light on the situation. But the voice on the other end was not familiar. "Lisa, this is just the beginning. There's a price to be paid for exposing the truth. And trust me, you'll be the one who pays it. You've made a mistake. You've made a lot of mistakes." The voicemail cut off abruptly, leaving Lisa staring at her phone, her heart racing. This was no longer just about the case. This was about something much bigger. And now, Lisa had to decide whether she was going to back down or continue down a path that might lead to her destruction. One thing was certain: she had made powerful enemies and the game was far from over. The next morning, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had barely slept, the cryptic voicemail and the unsettling messages from me replaying over and over in her mind. As she sat at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee, she tried to focus on the case, on the mission at hand. but the threat lurking in the shadows felt too real to ignore. Her phone buzzed again, and for a moment, Lisa's heart stopped. She glanced at the screen, half expecting another mysterious message. Instead, it was an email from the courthouse. It was an update on her case. The subject line read, "Urgent, court hearing rescheduled." Lisa clicked it open quickly, hoping for some clarity. The email said that the hearing for her case had been moved to the following week, and in the meantime, the court was reviewing all documentation and considering additional witnesses. She sighed in frustration. She had hoped that after yesterday's events, the case would move forward faster, but now it seemed like a delay, a strategic one. Someone somewhere was pulling strings. Just as Lisa was about to close the email, a new message popped up in her inbox. It was a reminder from the courthouse. "Please report to a mandatory hearing with Chief Justice King regarding your involvement in yesterday's proceedings." Lisa's stomach churned. A mandatory hearing with Justice King? What was this about? The text from E still loomed over her, making her nervous about what awaited her. She knew she couldn't ignore this. Whatever was happening behind the scenes, it was clear that things were about to escalate even further. An hour later, Lisa found herself sitting in the cold, sterile waiting room outside Justice King's office. The courthouse was quieter than usual, and the air seemed heavier, as if everyone knew something was about to change. Lisa tapped her foot nervously, staring at the polished floor. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Could she trust Justice King? Was she really on her side, or was she simply using Lisa's case as a pawn in some larger game? The door to the office opened, and a court officer motioned for Lisa to enter. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with heavy, dark curtains drawn across the windows. The Chief Justice sat behind a large mahogany desk, flipping through a stack of papers. She didn't look up as Lisa entered, but there was something about the way she carried herself, calm, controlled, like she was always one step ahead. "Take a seat, Ms. Daniels," Justice King said, her voice even but carrying an undertone of authority. Lisa sat, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she wasn't about to back down now. Not after everything she'd been through. "You've caused quite a stir, Ms. Daniels," Justice King continued, her eyes finally meeting Lisa's. "You took a significant risk yesterday. A calculated one, I'd say." Lisa's mind raced. "I did what was right, Your Honor," she replied, her voice steady, but she could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her. "I exposed the corruption in the courtroom. Judge Hayes was out of line. She needed to be held accountable." Justice King leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "I agree, Ms. Daniels. But it's not just about Judge Hayes. This case, it's much larger than that. And now you've caught the attention of people you can't simply walk away from." The words hung in the air, like a threat, unspoken but clear. Lisa's pulse quickened. Was the Chief Justice warning her? Or was she just stating a fact? "You think you're on the side of justice," Justice King said, her voice softer now, almost as if she were talking to herself. "But you're playing a game that's been in motion long before you entered this courtroom. The people you've angered have the power to destroy you, and you're not prepared for what's coming." Lisa's mind spun. "What do you mean, Your Honor?" she asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Who are these people?" Justice King stared at her for a long moment, as if deciding whether to reveal the truth. Finally she spoke, her voice low but sharp. "They're people who control the very system you're fighting to change," she said. "They operate in the shadows, manipulating the law for their own gain. And you're now on their radar." Lisa's heart sank. She had known this fight would be hard, but she hadn't expected it to be this dangerous. Who were these people? And why had she, a lone lawyer, been thrust into the middle of it? Justice King leaned forward, her gaze intense. "You need to be careful, Ms. Daniels. You've made a lot of enemies and some of them are closer than you think." Lisa's head spun. Who could she trust? She thought of Aaron, her colleague. Could he be involved somehow? What about the mysterious texts? Were they all connected? Before she could ask another question, Justice King stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "I've done what I can for you," the Chief Justice said, her voice returning to its earlier sternness. "But from here on out, you're on your own. Your case will continue, but don't be surprised if things get complicated. And remember, not everyone in this system is interested in justice. Some people are only interested in control." Lisa stood up, feeling both empowered and overwhelmed. She had hoped for clarity, but instead she had just been thrust into an even bigger mystery. The battle was far from over, and now she had to figure out how to navigate a system that was more corrupt than she had ever imagined. As she left the office, the weight of the world seemed to settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just fighting for a case anymore. She was fighting for her own survival. Her phone buzzed again, and for a moment, Lisa felt a flash of dread. But this time, when she checked the screen, it wasn't from me. It was from Aaron. "Be careful. I got something. Meet me tonight. It's bigger than we thought." Lisa's heart skipped a beat. The game was changing, and she had no idea what she was about to walk into. Lisa arrived at the small cafe that evening, the one she and Aaron often used as their meeting spot. The place was quiet, dimly lit with the soft hum of ambient music playing in the background. She could hear the clinking of cups and the low murmur of other patrons, but her mind was elsewhere. She had barely thought about anything except the warning from Justice King. Who were these people she had angered? How deep did this corruption run? As she sat down at the corner table, her fingers drummed nervously against the surface. The tension from the morning's meeting with Justice King still weighed heavily on her. The Chief Justice's cryptic words echoed in her mind. "You're not prepared for what's coming." The door swung open and Aaron stepped inside. His usual confident stride was replaced with a noticeable hesitation. His eyes scanned the room before he spotted Lisa. He walked over quickly, and as soon as he sat down he leaned in, his voice low. "You're not going to like this," he began, glancing around as if making sure no one was listening. "But we need to talk about the big picture here." Lisa raised an eyebrow, already bracing herself for bad news. "What do you mean, Aaron?" He took a deep breath before speaking again. "I did some digging. The text messages, the strange threats you've been getting, those aren't just random. They're connected to something much bigger than you and me." Lisa felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "What are you talking about? Who's behind this?" Aaron hesitated, clearly weighing his next words carefully. "There's a group," he said quietly. "A secretive group within the legal system. People with more power than we ever realized. They pull the strings behind closed doors, controlling cases, outcomes, even judges. They make sure the system stays the way they want it." Lisa's mind raced. A secret group within the legal system? She thought about everything that had happened over the past few weeks, the way Judge Hayes had mocked her, the sudden shift in the courtroom when Justice King had intervened, and the ominous voicemail she had received. It was all starting to make sense in a way she hadn't expected. "So, this isn't just about the case anymore," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is bigger than me." Aaron nodded gravely. "Much bigger. And you've made yourself a target by standing up to Judge Hayes. She's not just some rogue judge, she's part of this network. And now you're in their sights." Lisa's chest tightened. She'd known her fight for justice would be hard, but she hadn't realized just how dangerous it would get. "What do we do now? How do we fight back against something this big?" Aaron leaned in even closer, his voice tense. "We need to find out who's at the top of this pyramid. Who's really pulling the strings. If we can expose them, maybe we can stop it before it's too late." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "And how do we do that?" Aaron hesitated for a moment before pulling out a small folder from his bag and placing it in front of her. "I've been collecting information. These are documents I found, notes, emails, and some confidential files from the courthouse. It's not much yet, but it's enough to get us started." Lisa opened the folder and flipped through the papers. Her eyes widened as she saw names, dates, and strange references to cases that had been manipulated, trials that had been derailed, and decisions that had been made in favor of the highest bidders. This was it. This was the evidence she had been searching for. "These are the names of judges, lawyers, and officials involved in corrupt decisions," Lisa muttered, scanning the pages. "They've been covering their tracks for years." Aaron nodded. "Exactly. And the more I dug, the more I realized that these people have been running the show for a long time. If we keep going, we might uncover even more, but we need to be careful. These people don't play by the rules." Lisa slammed the folder shut. "So what now? Do we take this to the authorities? To the press?" Aaron's face grew serious. "We can't do that yet. If we go public too soon, we'll be walking right into their trap. We need to be strategic. First, we need to know who is at the top of the food chain. Who's really controlling everything. And then, we strike." Lisa leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. She had always known the fight for justice was dangerous, but she had never anticipated how far it would go. The stakes had never been higher, and she realized now that there was no turning back. If she wanted to expose the corruption, she would have to play their game, but on her terms. She looked at Aaron, determination burning in her eyes. "Then let's find out who's at the top." As the conversation continued, Lisa and Aaron made a plan. They would go deeper into the records, trace the connections, and gather more evidence if they could. But with every step they took, the danger would grow. The people they were up against weren't just corrupt, they were powerful. and they would stop at nothing to protect their empire. As they left the cafe, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow, every flicker of movement seemed to be a threat. She glanced over her shoulder but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the sense of being hunted was there, lurking just beneath the surface. Lisa's phone buzzed once more, and this time, it was another message from the same unknown number. Her fingers shook as she opened it. "You're in too deep now, Lisa. This is your last warning. Stay out of it or you'll regret it." The message was clear. They knew she was onto something. And now, Lisa knew she had to keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. The system was broken and she was the one who had to fix it. As she walked into the night, the weight of the task ahead pressing on her, one thought consumed her mind: they had no idea who they were up against. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Lisa. The mounting pressure, the sense of danger that lingered in the air, it all seemed to close in around her as she worked late into the night, poring over the documents Aaron had given her. The evidence was damning, but it was scattered like pieces of a puzzle that needed to be carefully assembled. Each new file she uncovered led to another, each connection revealing a more twisted web of corruption within the legal system. The names she had seen before: judges, lawyers, officials, seemed almost too connected. There was a pattern, one that Lisa couldn't ignore. Whoever was at the top of this operation had planned this system of manipulation for years. But despite the progress, something inside her told her they weren't going to let her get too far. The text messages from E had stopped, but Lisa felt a growing sense of paranoia. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching her, lurking just beyond her reach, ready to strike. That afternoon, as she sat at her desk, her phone buzzed again. It was a call from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat as she picked up, her hand trembling slightly. "Hello," she answered, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension building. "Ms. Daniels," came the voice on the other end. It was a man's voice, calm but icy. "I'm sure you've realized by now that your actions have consequences. You're digging into things you don't fully understand." Lisa's pulse quickened. She had been expecting this. Whoever this was, they knew too much about what she was doing. "What do you want?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her voice firm, though she could feel her chest tighten. "All in good time," the man said. "But you need to stop this investigation. It's not too late for you to turn back. If you don't, the next step won't be something you can come back from. We can make sure you never practice law again, Ms. Daniels." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Lisa knew this was a threat, but she couldn't back down now. She had already come too far. "I'm not scared of you," she replied, her voice cold, though she felt the knot in her stomach tighten. "I'm not going to stop." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then the voice came back, softer but more menacing. "You should be. You've already crossed a line. And now there's no way back." The line went dead. Lisa sat in stunned silence for a moment, staring at her phone. This wasn't just an idle threat. They meant it. Whoever was behind this was watching her every move. And they weren't afraid to make their power felt. She stood up, pacing the room. The walls seemed to close in on her as she tried to process everything. The case, the threats, the people who were pulling the strings, everything was spinning out of control. Lisa couldn't afford to be intimidated, but she was starting to wonder if she had underestimated just how deep this went. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Lisa quickly gathered herself, her heart still racing as she opened it. Standing there was Aaron, his face serious and tense. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've been digging deeper. And I think I've found something that might explain everything." Lisa closed the door behind him, her nerves on edge. "What have you found?" Aaron handed her a thick file, and as she flipped it open, her eyes widened in shock. The file contained details on a series of high-profile cases that had all been influenced, manipulated, or outright rigged by the same group that was behind Judge Hayes's actions. "What is this?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking as she looked over the papers. "It's all connected," Aaron replied. "These people, this group, they've been controlling outcomes for years. They've infiltrated every corner of the legal system, from judges to prosecutors to high-ranking officials. And they've been using their power to destroy anyone who stands in their way." Lisa skimmed through the documents, each page revealing more about the depth of the corruption. But there was one name that caught her eye. It was a name that had appeared in every single document: Charles Montgomery. "Who is this?" Lisa asked, pointing to the name. Aaron's face darkened. "Charles Montgomery is the man at the top. He's the one pulling all the strings. He's the one behind the network of corrupt judges, lawyers, and politicians. He's been controlling everything for years." Lisa's heart raced. She had heard rumors of Montgomery's influence, but she hadn't realized the extent of it. This wasn't just a case of one bad judge, it was a full-scale operation, run by the most powerful man in the system. If Montgomery is at the top, Lisa said, her voice shaking with both fear and determination, then we have to expose him. We have to bring him down. Aaron nodded, but his expression was grim. That's the problem. Montgomery is untouchable. He's been careful, covering his tracks for years. And anyone who gets too close, well, you've already seen what happens. Lisa took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions now. If Montgomery was truly behind everything, then she was the only one who could stop him. We have no choice, Lisa said, her voice firm. We have to keep going. We can't let him win. Aaron looked at her, a mixture of admiration and concern in his eyes. You're right. But we need more. We need proof, something solid enough to take him down for good. Lisa thought for a moment, then a plan began to form in her mind. If Montgomery was as powerful as Aaron said, they couldn't go at him directly. They needed a way to expose him without giving him a chance to cover his tracks. We need to get into his inner circle, Lisa said. We need to find someone who knows his secrets. Someone who can give us the evidence we need. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Do you have anyone in mind? Lisa thought about it for a moment, then her mind flashed to a name, someone who might be the key to everything. Someone who had been in Montgomery's orbit for years but had just recently fallen out of favor. I think I know just the person, she said. We just need to find them before Montgomery does. As the two of them began to formulate their next move, Lisa couldn't help but feel the weight of what was at stake. This was no longer just about one corrupt judge, it was about dismantling an entire system that had been rigged from the start. And if they succeeded, they would be taking on the most dangerous man in the country. The game had changed. And Lisa knew the next move would be their most dangerous yet. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Lisa received an anonymous text message. The air in her apartment felt thick with tension as she read the message. Montgomery's people are watching. Be careful who you trust. Lisa's heart raced, the text confirming her worst fears. Whoever was behind the messages, whether it was the same person who had been threatening her for days or someone else entirely, was still out there, waiting for her to slip up. Her mind raced. Who could it be? Who knew about her investigation and who was trying to stop her? She quickly put her phone down, trying to refocus on the task at hand. The more she thought about it, the more she realized there was no going back. She had already taken on the system now, it seemed like the system was coming for her. Aaron had been right. Montgomery was untouchable and whoever was helping him was ruthless. Lisa knew that if they were going to bring him down, they couldn't play by the rules. They had to think outside the box, find new allies and move quickly. She grabbed her coat, hurried out the door and made her way to her car. The next step was critical. They needed someone inside Montgomery's circle, someone who could get them the proof they needed to take him down for good. Lisa's thoughts drifted to the one person who might be able to help them. Rachel Cross, a former associate of Montgomery's. Rachel had worked closely with him for years, but after a sudden fall from grace, she had disappeared from the legal scene. Word on the street was that she had been pushed out because she had become a threat to Montgomery's operations. If anyone knew Montgomery's secrets, it would be Rachel. Lisa had met Rachel once at a legal conference. She was sharp, determined, and far from naive. If she could find Rachel, she might just have the key to ending Montgomery's reign of power. As Lisa drove through the city, her thoughts continued to race. She couldn't shake the feeling that Montgomery's people were closing in. Was she being followed? Were they waiting for her to make a mistake? The unease settled deep within her, but she refused to let it stop her. She had to find Rachel. If Rachel had any information that could connect Montgomery to the web of corruption, it would be the leverage they needed to break the system wide open. When Lisa reached the address she had for Rachel's last known location, she found an empty apartment. The windows were covered with dark curtains and there was no sign of life. Lisa's heart sank. Had she been too late? But then something caught her eye. A small slip of paper, crumpled and stuffed into the corner of the doorframe. She reached out to grab it, feeling a surge of hope. The note was hastily scribbled, the writing shaky. If you want to meet, go to the old coffee shop on 5th and Main. 9 p.m. Come alone. Lisa's pulse quickened. It was Rachel's handwriting. Lisa had no idea if it was a trap, but it was the only lead she had. She didn't hesitate. She had to go. That evening, Lisa arrived at the coffee shop a little before 9 p.m. It was a small, quiet place, exactly the kind of spot someone would use for a clandestine meeting. As she stepped inside, she scanned the room for any sign of Rachel. There was no one in the corner where they had agreed to meet. Lisa found a seat by the window watching the door. She had been prepared for this. This wasn't her first dangerous meeting, but every time felt like the first. Each moment was laden with risk. Then, at exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened and Lisa's eyes locked onto a familiar face. Rachel Cross stepped inside, wearing a dark jacket and a hood that obscured most of her face. She looked different, older, more worn. But there was something about her sharp eyes that hadn't changed. Lisa stood up, her heart racing. "Rachel," she called softly. Rachel looked around quickly before locking eyes with Lisa. She motioned for Lisa to follow her to the back of the shop, where the tables were more secluded. Without a word they sat down. Rachel leaned in close, her voice low. "You're in deeper than you think, Lisa. Montgomery's been watching you. And he's not the only one." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "I know. I've been getting threats and now someone's texting me. It's like I'm being hunted." Rachel's expression softened, but there was a sharp edge to her words. "It's not just Montgomery. He's part of a larger network, a web of people with power. They've infiltrated every level of the legal system. Judges, prosecutors, even lawmakers. They have eyes and ears everywhere. And if you keep pushing, they'll make sure you're erased." Lisa clenched her fists, feeling the weight of Rachel's warning. "I'm not going to back down. I can't." Rachel studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I didn't think you would. But you need to understand something, Lisa. This isn't just about a corrupt judge or a rigged case. This is about a system that's been in place for decades, and Montgomery is just a cog in the machine." Lisa leaned forward, her mind racing. "Then we need to take down the whole system. We need to expose them all." Rachel paused, her eyes narrowing. "And you think you can do that? Do you even understand what's at stake here? They don't just ruin lives, they destroy people, families, careers. If you try to take them down, you're not just risking your life. You're risking everything you've ever worked for." Lisa's jaw tightened. "Then I'll risk it. Because if I don't, nothing will ever change." Rachel looked at her for a long time as if weighing her words. Finally she sighed. "I can help you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But we have to be careful. There are people watching every move we make." Lisa nodded, feeling a sense of determination wash over her. This was it. They were getting closer to the truth, closer to Montgomery. But Rachel's warning still echoed in her mind. She had made a dangerous enemy, and it seemed like the deeper she went, the more at risk she became. Just as Rachel was about to speak again, the door to the cafe opened with a loud creak. A figure entered and Lisa's heart stopped. Standing in the doorway was a man in a suit, his eyes scanning the room as he walked directly toward their table. It was one of Montgomery's men. Lisa's blood ran cold. They had found her. The game was changing and now the stakes were higher than ever. The air in the coffee shop seemed to freeze the moment the man entered. His eyes scanned the room with precision, like a hawk looking for its prey. Lisa's heart pounded as she watched him make his way toward their table. She had only seen a few of Montgomery's men before, but this one was different, more controlled, more professional. There was no mistaking it. He wasn't just another thug sent to intimidate her. He was a messenger and he had a mission. Rachel's eyes flicked toward the man, then back to Lisa. She didn't flinch, but Lisa could see the tension in her body. She knew the situation had just escalated to a level they couldn't have prepared for. Lisa's hand instinctively reached for her bag where she kept her phone. She had to act fast. She had to get out of there before things went any further. But as she stood up, the man reached their table and spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Lisa Daniels," he said, addressing her directly. "I'm afraid you've been very careless." Lisa froze, her mind scrambling for a response. She couldn't afford to show any weakness. She had to stay calm even if the walls felt like they were closing in on her. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lisa replied, her voice steady though her heart raced. She glanced at Rachel, who was already standing up, her eyes scanning the room for any other threats. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too vulnerable. The man ignored Rachel entirely, focusing solely on Lisa. "You're digging into things that you shouldn't. Montgomery doesn't take kindly to people who interfere with his business." Rachel's hand subtly went to her purse, her fingers brushing the handle of a small weapon hidden inside. But she didn't make a move, and Lisa could feel the silent warning in her gaze. "Don't escalate this." "Then why don't you tell Montgomery I'm not afraid of him?" Lisa said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I'm not going to stop. Not now. Not ever." The man's eyes flickered with something amusement, maybe? It was hard to tell. "You don't understand the gravity of the situation, do you?" He took a step closer, leaning in just enough to make Lisa uncomfortable. "You're in over your head. And trust me, your life as you know it will disappear if you keep pushing. Lisa's pulse quickened. She couldn't let him intimidate her, but she knew the man wasn't bluffing. She had seen too many powerful figures like him, people who didn't hesitate to ruin lives when things didn't go their way. Before she could respond, Rachel spoke up, her voice calm but laced with threat. If you're here to intimidate her, you've got the wrong woman. She stood tall, her posture defensive. Leave her alone and we won't have any issues. The man's eyes turned to Rachel for the first time, sizing her up. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause before he straightened up. This doesn't concern you, miss? Stay out of it. Rachel didn't back down. This is between me and her now. If you're going to send threats, you better be ready for consequences. Her voice was ice cold, and there was something about it that made the man hesitate. For a moment, the tension in the room was unbearable. Then the man finally straightened, his expression unreadable. This isn't over, Ms. Daniels, he said, his voice lowering to a dangerous tone. We'll be watching. Keep that in mind. Lisa could feel the weight of his words in the pit of her stomach. She watched him turn and walk out of the cafe, his eyes still fixed on her. As the door closed behind him, Lisa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. But the relief was fleeting. She knew this was just the beginning. Rachel turned to Lisa, her face serious but not shaken. You handled that better than I thought you would, she said quietly. But don't mistake this for a warning. Montgomery's people don't just threaten. They act. Lisa nodded, her mind racing. I know. But we're not backing down. Not now. Rachel's eyes softened for a moment, as if she were considering something. I should have warned you sooner, but I didn't realize how deep you were going with this. She paused, looking over her shoulder to make sure the man had truly left. But now you're officially on their radar. And believe me, they don't forget. Lisa's mind raced with the implications. She knew the stakes had just skyrocketed. It wasn't just about a case anymore, it was about survival. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous it became. Montgomery wasn't going to let her walk away from this. And Rachel's warning echoed in her mind. They don't just threaten. They act. But as Lisa looked at the file Rachel had given her, the pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together. Montgomery might have his reach, but Lisa had something he didn't: determination. She wasn't going to let fear control her. She had come too far. Rachel seemed to sense the shift in Lisa's determination. You're not alone in this, Lisa, she said quietly. I'll help you, but you need to understand that once we take this on, there's no going back. There's a price to pay for bringing these people down. You've seen a taste of it already. Lisa took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Rachel's words. Then let's make sure they pay the price, she said firmly. I'm in. All the way. The two women exchanged a brief, knowing glance, and Lisa knew then that there was no turning back. She had made her choice. Montgomery had made a mistake by underestimating her, and now she was ready to take him down no matter the cost. As Lisa and Rachel left the coffee shop, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. The game had changed, and now the real fight was about to begin. With every step they took, Lisa knew the danger would escalate. But she also knew that she was no longer fighting alone. They had one goal now: bring Montgomery and his corrupt empire crashing down. And they would stop at nothing to see it through. The days following their meeting at the cafe felt like a blur. Lisa and Rachel had set their plan in motion, but the deeper they went, the more dangerous the situation became. Lisa had been a part of high-stakes legal cases before, but nothing had prepared her for the shadows she was now walking in. She could feel the eyes on her, the whispers from the people who were now aware of her every move. Aaron had continued his own investigation, tracking down leads, contacting sources, and digging through Montgomery's past. What they were uncovering was enough to make anyone nervous, but Lisa couldn't afford to hesitate. Montgomery's empire was built on manipulation, lies, and unchecked power, and she wasn't going to let that stand any longer. It was late one evening when Rachel called Lisa, her voice tense. We found something big. Lisa's pulse quickened as she set down the file she had been reviewing. What do you mean? Rachel's voice lowered. I've been digging through Montgomery's financial records. There's a pattern of suspicious transactions, money moving to offshore accounts, bribes paid to judges, and lawyers with ties to criminal syndicates. This is the kind of thing that could blow his entire operation wide open. But we need more, something concrete, something that links him directly to the manipulation of the legal system. Lisa's heart raced. This was the moment they had been working toward, but it was also the most dangerous. If they were right, they had the evidence to take down Montgomery. But if they were wrong, or if Montgomery caught wind of their investigation, the consequences could be catastrophic. I'm meeting with Aaron tonight, Lisa said, her voice steady but determined. We'll go over everything we have and see if we can make a move on this. Rachel didn't respond immediately, but Lisa could hear the hesitation in her silence. Finally, Rachel spoke again. Lisa, I need to make sure you're ready for what's coming. We've crossed a line. This isn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It's about taking down one of the most powerful men in the country. And once we go public with this, there's no turning back. Lisa stood up, her mind racing. The stakes had never been higher, but she wasn't going to back down now. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm. Let's end this. As the evening wore on, Lisa met Aaron at their usual spot, a quiet park bench in the middle of the city, hidden behind a row of trees. The streetlights above cast long shadows, but Lisa didn't mind. The shadows had become her constant companions these past few weeks, and now they were her shield. Aaron handed her a thick folder as soon as she sat down. This is it, he said, his voice low. Everything we've gathered on Montgomery. Lisa opened the folder carefully, scanning the pages. What she saw sent a chill down her spine. There were detailed financial records, transactions from offshore accounts, payments to judges, and suspicious links to a network of organized crime. But there was one document that stood out more than the others. It was a list of names. Judges, politicians, and high-ranking officials. All of them had ties to Montgomery, and all of them were involved in cases that had been manipulated for years. It was a blueprint for a system that had been rigged from the inside out, and Montgomery was the one pulling the strings. Lisa's hand trembled as she looked at the names on the list. She recognized some of them powerful people who had been involved in her own cases. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge. This was an entire network of corruption that had spread like a disease through the legal system. How do we expose this? Lisa whispered, her mind spinning. How do we get this out there without getting ourselves killed? Aaron took a deep breath. We need to go public, but we need protection first. We need to get this evidence into the right hands, someone who can make sure Montgomery doesn't silence us. Lisa nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The plan was simple, but the risks were immense. They would have to take this evidence to the media, but first they needed to make sure Montgomery didn't catch wind of it. As Lisa continued to look over the documents, she felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. They had the evidence to take Montgomery down, but she knew it wasn't going to be easy. He was too powerful, too connected. They would need allies, and they would need to move quickly. Suddenly, Lisa's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her eyes narrowing when she saw the message. You've crossed the line, Lisa. There's no going back. You'll regret this. It was from me. The same person who had been threatening her all along. Aaron leaned in, noticing the message. Is that him again? Lisa didn't answer at first. She could feel the adrenaline surging through her as she stared at the screen. Whoever he was, they were watching her every move. And they were getting closer. It's him, Lisa finally said, her voice cold. But I'm not backing down. Not now. Aaron nodded, his expression grim. We'll take this to the media tomorrow. But be ready. Once we expose this, Montgomery will come after us. We need to be prepared for anything. As they discussed the final steps of their plan, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Montgomery was too powerful and his reach too wide. If they were going to succeed, they had to act fast. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. The weight of the decision hung over her, but she knew there was no turning back. She was about to face the most dangerous man she had ever encountered, and she couldn't afford to make a mistake. The next day she would make her move. She would expose Montgomery and his corrupt empire once and for all. But as she sat in her apartment, staring out at the city below, she couldn't shake the thought that the battle was only just beginning. The system was broken, and she was the one who was going to fix it. But how much would she have to sacrifice to do so? Lisa stood up, her resolve hardening. She had one shot at this. And she wasn't going to let Montgomery or anyone else stop her. The fight for justice had never felt more dangerous, but Lisa wasn't afraid anymore. She had crossed a line, yes. But now she was the one calling the shots. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow across Lisa's desk, but it did little to ease the tension that had taken root in her chest. The day ahead would decide everything. As she sat staring at the files spread before her, her phone buzzed again. You're running out of time, Lisa. There's nowhere to hide. You've made your choice. It was from me again. The same threatening, cryptic messages. Lisa's hands shook slightly as she read the text. But she wasn't scared anymore. The fear that had once held her back had been replaced with something sharper: determination. She had to finish this. With a deep breath, she shoved the phone aside and focused on the task at hand. The plan was in motion. Today, she and Aaron would hand over the evidence they had gathered to a trusted investigative journalist who could take it to the press. It was their last move and it had to work. But Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had been careful, meticulous, but nothing could ever prepare her for the kind of retaliation Montgomery and his network were capable of. They weren't just going to roll over. They would fight back with everything they had. She glanced at the clock. It was almost time for the meeting. The sound of her apartment doorbell ringing jolted her from her thoughts. Lisa stood quickly, her heart rate picking up. She wasn't expecting anyone, but she knew who it was before she even reached the door. When she opened it, Aaron was standing there, his face grim. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes darkened by exhaustion. "Lisa, we need to talk," he said, his voice low. "Something's happened." Lisa's stomach dropped. "What's going on?" Aaron stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've been following up on some of the leads," he began, his voice tight with concern. "And I found something that doesn't sit right. We've been playing into Montgomery's hands." Lisa's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Aaron took a deep breath and handed her a file, one she hadn't seen before. "I found this while going through the accounts. These aren't just bribes or rigged cases. There's a deeper layer to this. Montgomery has been influencing elections, pulling strings in local governments, even making sure his connections land in positions of power." Lisa's hands trembled as she opened the file, her eyes scanning the pages filled with names, dates, and details she hadn't expected. The scope of Montgomery's operation was much larger than she had anticipated. He wasn't just manipulating the legal system, he was controlling entire cities, entire networks of influence. "How could we have missed this?" Lisa whispered, feeling the weight of the realization. "This is bigger than just us." Aaron nodded. "It's bigger than just the legal system. We're not just fighting one corrupt judge. We're up against a man who has systematically infiltrated every part of society, politics, business, law enforcement. This is a fight for the future of the city. And honestly, maybe even the country." Lisa closed the file, feeling the cold grip of fear tighten in her chest. "So what do we do now? We're already in too deep. There's no turning back." Aaron's expression softened. "I know. And that's why we need to act fast. The more we expose, the more dangerous this becomes. Montgomery won't hesitate to use his influence to destroy us." Lisa took a deep breath. "We have to keep going. We have to take him down now." Aaron hesitated for a moment before nodding. "You're right. But we can't do it alone anymore. We need more support. We need to get this into the hands of more people, not just one journalist. We need a network, people who can protect us, amplify our message." Lisa's mind raced. It was a risky move, but Aaron was right. They couldn't go into this alone. If they were going to bring Montgomery down, they needed to have allies, people in the media, in the government, even in law enforcement, who would help them expose the full extent of his operations. "But who can we trust?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aaron looked at her, his gaze intense. "We have one chance to make this work. And we need to move quickly. We'll contact the journalist we plan to meet with, but we'll also reach out to a few key figures in the press. They'll know how to make the information public and make sure Montgomery can't cover it up." Lisa nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then let's do it." But just as the words left her mouth, her phone buzzed again. She reached for it, her hand trembling. The message was from the same unknown number. "You've made your move, but Montgomery is already one step ahead. He knows. He's coming for you." Lisa's heart dropped. "We need to go now," she said, her voice sharp. "We don't have time." Aaron's face paled as he looked at her. "This is it, isn't it? He's going to make his move now." Lisa swallowed hard. "We'll make ours first. We need to contact the journalist and get everything ready. We're not backing down." They moved quickly, finalizing the plan and preparing to release the information. Lisa could feel the pressure mounting with every passing minute. The threat of Montgomery's retaliation loomed over them, but there was no turning back now. They reached the journalist's office just as the evening sun began to dip below the horizon. The city felt quiet, too quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The journalist, a woman named Laura Simmons, had been vetted by Aaron. She was known for breaking major stories, and they hoped she would have the reach and protection they needed. As they entered her office, Laura stood up to greet them. Her smile was warm, but there was an edge to her gaze, a knowing look that made Lisa feel like she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. "You've got everything?" Laura asked, her tone professional but with an undercurrent of urgency. Lisa handed her the file containing all the evidence they had gathered, the financial records, the names, the transactions. "It's all there." Montgomery's entire operation. You expose this and the world will know what he's been doing. Laura glanced over the documents, her eyes widening. She looked up at them, a quiet nod of acknowledgement. I'll take it from here. You did the hard part. Now, it's my turn to make sure this sees the light of day. But just as she spoke, a loud noise erupted from the hallway outside the office, shouting, followed by the sound of doors crashing open. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone. Montgomery's people had found them. The game had changed. There was no more time for second chances. We need to go, Aaron said urgently, grabbing Lisa's arm. But as they turned to leave, the door to the office slammed open. Standing in the doorway was a man Lisa had seen before, one of Montgomery's enforcers. He smirked as he stepped inside. I told you, Lisa. You've crossed the line. Lisa's heart raced as the man stepped closer, blocking the door to the office. His cold, calculating gaze never left her as he moved with deliberate precision. The moment he entered, it felt like the air in the room grew heavier, as if the walls were closing in. This was no longer a fight for justice. This was a battle for survival. Aaron quickly stepped in front of Lisa, his posture defensive, but the man didn't flinch. He was bigger, more menacing. And the smirk on his face told Lisa everything she needed to know. He wasn't here to negotiate. You've made a huge mistake, Lisa, the man said, his voice low and controlled, each word calculated to instill fear. Montgomery doesn't take kindly to people like you, people who think they can play with his empire. Lisa swallowed, her pulse quickening. She glanced at Laura, who was frozen behind her desk, eyes wide with terror. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with fear, but Lisa refused to let it break her. This was her moment. They had come too far and there was no turning back. Get out of my way, Aaron said firmly, his voice steady, though Lisa could sense the underlying tension. You're not taking anyone anywhere. The enforcer's smile widened, but it wasn't one of humor. It was a smile of intimidation, of power. He took another step forward, his hand moving toward his jacket. Lisa's eyes darted to the movement, and she could feel her stomach twist into knots. Before the man could make a move, Lisa acted. She wasn't going to let fear control her any longer. She had worked too hard, risked too much to back down now. You think you can stop me? You think you can just walk in here and threaten us? Lisa's voice cut through the tension like a knife, stronger than she had ever felt before. She felt a surge of power as she spoke, the realization hitting her. She had nothing left to lose. If you think Montgomery is untouchable, you're wrong. And I'm going to make sure the world knows it. The enforcer's eyes narrowed, but he didn't back off. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulling out a piece of paper and slapping it on the table in front of them. You think your little crusade is going to change anything? This is bigger than you. You're making a mess, and Montgomery doesn't like it when people mess with his plans. Lisa took the paper, her hands trembling slightly. She unfolded it, her eyes scanning the text quickly. The words on the page were a threat, a warning. It was a legal document, a gag order. If they went public with the evidence, if they exposed Montgomery and his empire, they would face severe consequences. The document claimed that Lisa and anyone associated with her would be charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and multiple other crimes. If they didn't back down, they would be destroyed. Lisa's stomach turned as she read the terms. But it wasn't just a threat, it was a message. Montgomery was sending them a clear warning. Stop now or everything you've worked for will come crashing down. You've crossed the line, the enforcer repeated, his tone dark and menacing. This isn't just about you anymore. You're in too deep. Lisa looked up from the document, her heart pounding. The walls were closing in. Montgomery had his grip on everything, on the legal system, on the people they trusted, and now, it seemed, on her very existence. But there was one thing Montgomery had underestimated: Lisa's resolve. She turned to Aaron, her eyes meeting his with fierce determination. We can't stop now. We can't let him win. Aaron looked at her, his face grim but resolute. You're right, he said quietly. We've already gone too far to turn back. The enforcer took another step forward, his eyes flashing with anger. You think you can beat him? You think you can expose this system and get away with it? He's untouchable. You're nothing. The words stung, but Lisa didn't flinch. She stood taller, the fire in her eyes matching the strength in her voice. You don't understand, she said, her words cutting through the man's threats. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the people who've been hurt, for the ones Montgomery has crushed under his heel. You can threaten me all you want, but it won't change anything. This ends now. The enforcer's expression twisted into something far darker, his lips curling into a snarl. He moved toward her, but before he could reach her, A loud crash echoed through the room. The door to the office flew open with such force that it banged against the wall, and a new figure entered. It was Rachel. Without a second thought, Rachel pulled a gun from her jacket, her hand steady and calm. The enforcer froze, his eyes locked on the weapon, his jaw tightening. Rachel's gaze was unwavering as she pointed the gun directly at him. "You should have walked away," Rachel said, her voice low but firm. "But now you've got a problem. Because if you make another move, I won't hesitate." The tension in the room skyrocketed. The enforcer was caught between Lisa, Aaron, and Rachel with nowhere to go. For a long moment, neither side moved, the silence thick and heavy. Finally, the enforcer took a step back, his hands raised in mock surrender. "You think this changes anything? You're still dead in the water," he sneered, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Montgomery will come for you. You'll never be safe." But Rachel didn't flinch. "We're not afraid of Montgomery. Not anymore." The man glared at them one last time, his expression twisted in anger. "You'll regret this," he muttered before turning and storming out of the office. As the door slammed shut behind him, Lisa exhaled sharply, the tension draining from her body. But it wasn't over. It couldn't be over yet. Rachel lowered her gun, her expression hard. "We've got to move fast. He's not the only one. There's more coming." Lisa nodded, her thoughts already racing. They were running out of time, but they couldn't stop now. The information they had could bring Montgomery down, and they would make sure it got out no matter the cost. As Rachel turned to leave, Lisa reached out, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "We're not stopping. We're taking this to the press tomorrow. And we're going to make Montgomery pay for everything he's done." Rachel met her gaze and nodded. "Then let's finish this." The fight was far from over, but Lisa knew now more than ever that she was not alone. With Rachel, Aaron, and the evidence in hand, they had the power to expose Montgomery's empire. The clock was ticking, and the game had just entered its most dangerous phase. But Lisa was ready. The truth was coming. And nothing was going to stop her. The night before they were set to release everything to the press, Lisa couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. The moment she had been fighting for, the one that could expose Montgomery and his corrupt empire, was finally here. But the fear and the pressure weighed heavy on her. What if Montgomery had a contingency plan? What if they were walking into a trap? She checked her phone for the umpteenth time. The messages had stopped, the threats had dwindled, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching her every move. And there was no turning back. She thought of Aaron and Rachel, both working tirelessly beside her, both putting everything on the line for this cause. They had become her family in this fight. Without them, she knew this would never have been possible. But tomorrow it all came down to one moment. One decision. Would it be enough? At 6 a.m., Lisa met Aaron and Rachel at the makeshift office they had set up. It was a cramped room in an old building, but it had everything they needed. The file with the evidence was in her hands, ready to be passed on to Laura Simmons, the journalist who would be the one to make it public. Lisa walked in, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. It felt like the calm before the storm. "We're ready," Aaron said as Lisa stepped in, his voice filled with an unspoken tension. He had been pacing as if the time was dragging slower for him than anyone else. "Everything's in place. Once we send this to Laura, there's no stopping it." Lisa nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she placed the file on the table. "We need to be sure," she said quietly. "Once this goes out, Montgomery will know. And we need to be ready for the fallout." Rachel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, but there was a look in her eyes that matched Lisa's determined, unwavering. "If we don't do it now, we never will. He's been pulling the strings for too long and we've already risked everything. It's time to finish this." Lisa felt the weight of her words, the truth settling over her. This was the moment. They had the evidence, everything they needed to expose Montgomery. And they had the chance to right the wrongs of a corrupt system that had swallowed so many people whole. With a deep breath, Lisa took a seat and pulled out her phone. She composed a message to Laura. "We're ready. Time to make it public." She hit send. It felt like hours passed in the next few minutes, though it was only moments before her phone buzzed again. Laura's response came through, "Got it. I'm making the call now." Lisa exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. It was done. The truth was out there. There was no more waiting, no more second-guessing. But as she glanced up from her phone, the reality of the situation hit her again. The waiting wasn't over. Montgomery wasn't the type to go down without a fight. And if he didn't retaliate immediately, Lisa knew he would find another way to attack through their careers, their lives, their families. "We should head to the press office," Aaron said, breaking the silence. "Once it's out, the media will pick it up, but we need to stay ahead of the story." Rachel nodded, and without another word, the three of them made their way to the press office. The streets were quiet, but the unease in Lisa's stomach made every second feel like a countdown to something inevitable. They arrived at the office, where Laura was already waiting with a few of her colleagues. The team was ready. Lisa handed the file to Laura, her heart pounding as she watched the journalist begin making calls, preparing to release the story to the world. "This is it," Laura said, glancing up. "I'm going to make sure it goes viral. We'll have a statement ready by the end of the day." Lisa didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. She was too focused on what came next. The press would take it from here, but there was one final step. They had to make sure Montgomery couldn't silence them. The hours that followed were a blur of calls, emails, and media inquiries. The weight of what they had done settled over Lisa like a heavy cloak. She knew it was the right thing, but the fear of retaliation kept gnawing at her. By the time the evening came, the media coverage had exploded. News outlets were picking up the story, social media was buzzing with the revelation, and Montgomery's empire was beginning to crack. But then, just as the press stormed forward, Lisa received another text. It was from an unknown number. "You've exposed us. You've ruined everything. You have no idea what you've started. Montgomery will make sure you pay for this. And there's nowhere you can hide." Lisa stared at the message, her blood running cold. She knew what was coming, but there was no turning back. They had done the right thing, but at what cost? "Lisa," Aaron said, his voice tight with concern. "We need to go. Now." Lisa didn't have to ask why. She could feel the danger closing in. As they gathered their things, Lisa couldn't help but wonder what Montgomery would do next. Would he let them walk away? Or would he make them pay the price for their defiance? As she stepped out into the night, the weight of the moment settled on her. She had exposed the truth, taken on the most dangerous man in the country, and brought his empire to the edge of collapse. But at what cost? They didn't know yet, but they were ready. The battle was far from over. Montgomery had been taken down a peg, but there were still people out there who were loyal to him, people who would stop at nothing to protect the power he had built. But Lisa was no longer afraid. This fight was bigger than her now. It was about justice. It was about exposing the truth. And no matter what Montgomery threw at her next, Lisa Daniels was ready to face it. With her head held high, she walked into the unknown, knowing that she had done what needed to be done. She had started a revolution, a fight that would change everything. And she would see it through no matter the cost. The end of one chapter had come, but Lisa's story was just beginning.